There were few men outside the Death Guard that Garrow would ever have given the distinction of that address, but Tarvitz was one of them. He had earned Nathaniel's amity during the Preaxor campaign, and proven to him that for all the reputation of Fulgrim's Astartes as overconfident peacocks, there were men among the ranks of the Emperor's children that embodied the ideals of the Imperium.
I had wondered if we might cross paths here.
Tarvitz nodded.
We'll do more than that, my friend. Our companies are to form part of the force that will silence the monitor station.
Yes, of course. Garrow was aware that warriors from the 3rd Legion would be fighting alongside his 7th Company, but now that he knew Saul Tarvitz would be there, he felt a greater confidence.
Eidolon has given you this one, then?
Tarvitz hid a grin.
No, he'll be there, at my shoulder. He's not one to miss even a sniff of glory. I imagine he will goad me on to ensure the Death Guard don't take the lion's share of the kills.
Garrow's smile turned brittle.
It cheers me to see you, Honor Brother, he said.
His emotions, suddenly raw, there and then gone. Tarvitz caught the moment too.
I know that look, Nathaniel. What's troubling you?
He shook his head.
Oh, nothing. It's nothing. I am fatigued, that is all. And perhaps a bit overawed by all this.
He gestured around. The other officer glanced at the Primarch, still intent on their conversation.
I share that with you, he smirked. Is it true, what they say, that the War Master can stop your heart as soon as look at you?
Oh, he's impressive, of that you can have no doubt, agreed Garrow. But then, would you expect any less of the Emperor's chosen? He hesitated.
I'm surprised you weren't part of the Honor Guard. Doesn't your rank entitle you to that? Eidolon has favor over me, Tarvitz replied, and he would never share his moment in Horus's spotlight with another officer.
Garrow grunted.
If he preens about the moment too much, you might ask him to recount how Angron shouted him down for his impudence, and the War Master gave his approval to it.
Tarvitz laughed.
I doubt that part of the story will ever be told.
No. Garrow looked back at Mortarion and saw the Death Lord give a shallow bow to the World Eater.
I think we'll be leaving now. Until the battlefield then, Saul.
Until the battlefield, Nathaniel.
Tell Eidolon we'll try to leave a little glory for him, if he asks us politely.
The battle captain saluted and followed his master aboard the Stormbird.
Do you really think you can take him? Asked Raoul, tapping a quizzical finger on his chin.
Decius did not look up.
This is a battle like any other, and I intend to win it.
Raoul glanced at Sendek, who waited, poised and ready.
He's going to beat you to a standstill.
The Astartes leaned in closer, over the arena of combat.
Look here. Your Magister is under threat from his Castellan. Your Dragonar is pinned by his cannonades, and if you want a game, you can wait until after I have dispatched Sendek, snapped Decius. Until then, if you must watch, be silent. I need to think. That's why you'll lose, Raoul retorted. Let them play, Pyre, said Haker, the veteran pulling Raoul away from the regicide board as ill temper flared in the younger Astartes' eyes. Stop distracting him. Raoul allowed the older warrior to draw him back. Care to make a bet on the outcome? I'd hate to embarrass you again. He smiled. Solon's going to lose, Andus. That's as plain as your face.
Haker returned the smile.
Really? Well, although I may not be as handsome as you, I have the benefit of wisdom. And I'll tell you this. Solon Decius isn't the fool you think he is. I never said he was a fool.
Raoul was defensive.
But Sendek is the thinker, and regicide is a game of the mind. I've seen the mess Solon makes of the practice cages. That's where the lad's strength lies, in his fists.
Andus smirked.
You shouldn't underestimate him. He wouldn't be part of the battle captain's cadre if he was a dim candle.
The veteran cast a look over at the table, where Decius had just moved a soldat to take one of Sendek's iterators.
He's young, that's true, but he has a lot of potential. I've seen his kind before. Let him grow unguided, he'll turn down the wrong path and wind up a corpse. But mould a man like him with care and intention, and at the end you'll have a brother fit to be a captain himself one day.
Raoul blinked.
I thought you didn't like him. Why? Because I make sport of the lad? I do that to everyone. It's part of my charm.
Anders leaned closer and lowered his voice.
Of course, if you tell him I said any of those things, I'll deny it to the hilt and then I'll break your legs.
There was a decisive clack of wood on wood, and Raoul glanced around to see Sendek pressing his Empress to the board, surrendering the game to Decius with a grudging smile on his face.
Well played, brother. You are a singular opponent.
You see, prodded Haker.
He must have let him win, Raoul said lamely. That's a small mercy. Mercy is for the irresolute, broke in Voyen as he entered the exercise enclosure, intoning the battle axiom with insincere solemnity. Who asks for it? He shrugged back the hood of his off-duty robes. Anders nodded to the other Astartes.
Brother Raoul does.
He has once again been proven wrong, and it no doubt chafes upon him.
Raoul finally bared his teeth in mild annoyance.
Don't make me hurt you, old man.
Haker rolled his eyes.
And what of you, Merrick? Where have you been?
The question was a mild one, but Raoul saw a fractional flicker of tension in the apothecary's eyes.
At my business, Anders. Little more than that.
Voyen quickly turned the conversation away from him.
So, Pyre, I trust you are ready for the coming fight? I think the score is in my favour still, yes?
He nodded. Raoul and Voyen had a casual competition between them as to which man would take a kill first on any given mission.
Only competence counts, remember. That last one was only a servitor. Gun servitor, corrected Voyen. It would have killed me if I had let it.
He looked around.
I believe we will have ample chance to test the mettle of these defectors on Istvan. There's to be a multi-stage offensive. First a landing to deny the monitor stations on the outermost world. Then on to the inner planets for an assault in full.
Haker's lip curled.
You're very well informed. Captain Garrow has not returned from the War Master's barge, and yet already you know the details of the mission.
Voyen hesitated.
It's common enough knowledge.
His tone shifted, becoming more guarded.
Is it?
Raoul sensed something amiss.
Who told you, brother? Does it matter? The apothecary said defensively. The information came to me. I thought you would wish to know, but if you would rather remain unapprised...
That is not what he said, Anders noted.
Come, Merrick. Where did you learn these things? Someone in the infirmary babbling under the influence of pain nullifiers, perhaps? Or a talkative astropath?
Raoul became aware that the rest of the men in the room had fallen silent and were watching the exchange. Even Garrow's housecarl was there observing. Voyen saw Caleb too and shot him a frosty glare.
I asked you a question, brother, said Haker.
And this time it was in the tone of voice he used on the battlefield, one accustomed to giving orders and having them obeyed. Voyen's jaw hardened.
I can't say.
He stepped around the veteran and took a few paces towards his arming alcove. Haker caught his arm and stopped him.
What is it you have in your hand? Nothing of your concern, Sergeant.
The elder Astartes was easily twice the apothecary's age. Yet for all those decades, Haker's martial skills were deft and undimmed. He easily took Voyen's wrist and applied pressure to a nerve cluster, trapping his hand. Merrick's fingers uncurled of their own accord, and there, in his palm, was a mottled brass coin.
What is this? Haker demanded in a low voice. You know what it is, Voyen snapped back. Don't play me for a fool.
The dull disc bore the imprint of the Legion's sigil.
A lodge medal, breathed Rahl. You're in the lodges? Since when? I can't say, Voyen retorted, shaking off Haker's grip and walking to the alcove, where his sparse collection of personal effects were kept. Don't ask me anything else.
You know the battle captain's feelings on this matter, said Andus.
He refutes any clandestine gatherings. He refutes, Merrick interrupted. He does, not I. If Captain Garrow wishes to stay beyond the fraternity of the lodges, then that is his choice. And yours too, if you wish to follow him. But I do not. I am a member.
He blew out a breath.
There. It is said.
Decius was on his feet.
We are all part of the 7th, he growled. And the company's command cadre at that. Garrow sets the example. We should follow without question. If he would take the time to listen, he would understand.
Merrick shook his head and gestured with the medal.
You would understand that this is not some kind of secret society. It's just a place where men can meet and talk freely.
That seems so, noted Sendek. From what you have implied, in this lodge it appears that even the most sensitive of military information is bandied about without restraint.
Voyen shook his head angrily. It's not like that at all. Don't twist my meaning.
You must end your membership, Merrick, said Haker. Swear it now, and we'll speak no more of this conversation.
I won't. He gripped the coin tightly. You all know me. We are battle brothers. I've healed every one of you, saved the lives of some even. I am Merrick Voyen, your friend and comrade in arms. Do you really think that I would take part in something seditious? He snorted. Trust me, if you saw the faces of the men who were there, you'd understand that it's you and Garrow who are in the minority. What Grulgor and Typhon do with their companies is their own lookout, added Decius. And the rest, Voyen replied. I am far from the only soldier of the 7th in the association.
No, insisted Haker.
I would never lie to you. And if holding this token makes you think any less of me, then...
After a long moment, he bowed his head, deflated.
Then perhaps you are not the kinsman I thought you were.
When Voyen looked up again, someone else had joined the other men in the chamber. Rahl heard a razor edge of anger in Captain Garrow's voice as he spoke a single command. Give me the room. When they were alone, and Caleb sealed the door behind him, Garrow turned a hard stare on his subordinate. His mailed fingers tensed into fists.
I never heard you enter, Voyen muttered. How much did you hear?
You do not refute, he replied. I stood outside in the corridor a while before I entered.
The apothecary gave a dry laugh. I thought your housecarl was the spy.
What Caleb speaks of to me is guided only by his conscience. I do not task him.
Then he and I are alike.
Garrow looked away. You say, then, that it is your principles that made you join the lodge. Is that it?
Aye. I am the senior healer for the 7th Company. It's my duty to know the true feelings of the men who are part of it. Sometimes there are things a man will tell his lodge mates that he would not tell his apothecary.
Voyen stared down at the deck.
Am I to assume that you will have me posted to another company in light of this disclosure?
Some part of Garrow expected himself to explode with fury, but all he felt now was disappointment. I eschew the lodge, and then I learn a most trusted friend within my inner circle is a part of it. Such a thing might make me seem weak or short-sighted to others.
No, insisted the Astartes. Lord, please know, I did not choose this in order to undermine you. It was only the right choice for Merrick Voyen.
Garrow was silent for a few moments. We have been brothers in warfare for decades, over thousands of battlefields. You are a fine warrior and a better healer. I would not have had you join my cadre otherwise. But this, you kept this from us all, and made our comradeship cheap. If you stay under my command, Merrick, you will not find it easy to earn back the trust that you have lost today. He met the other man's gaze. Go or stay. Make the choice that is right for Merrick Voyen.
If I wish to remain, will my departure from the lodge be a condition of that, Lord?
The captain shook his head. I won't force you to disassociate yourself. You're still my battle brother, even if your decisions are sometimes not in line with mine.
Garrow stepped forward and offered Voyen his hand.
But I will have a pledge from you. Promise me, here and now, that if the Lodge ever compels you to turn from the face of the Emperor of Man, you will destroy that medal and reject them.
The apothecary took Garrow's hand. I swear it, Lord. On Terra itself, I swear it. The matter dealt with for the moment, Garrow gathered his men back together and briefed them on the battle plans the War Master had outlined. By his example, not a single harsh word was said to Voyen, but the apothecary kept silent and to the edge of things. No voice was raised in question as to why Voyen still stood with them, but Garrow saw reservations in the eyes of Decius, Rahl, and the others. When it was done, Garrow left his dress war gear to Caleb's attention and took his own counsel. So many things had come and gone in so short a time. It seemed like only moments ago that he had been looking over attack simulations for the raid on the Yorgal world ship. Now the Legiones Astartes massed for the first hammerblow strike on Istvan Extremis, and Garrow saw conflict in the heart of his own company. Had he made the wrong choice in letting Voyen remain? His mind moved back to the conversation with Mortarion before the War Council, where questions of the lodges had risen as well. It troubled the captain that he could not determine an easy path through these thoughts. At times he wondered if he were at fault, holding firmly to a conservative course, keeping the tradition and heart of the Legion alive, while time moved on and things changed. Yes, things were changing. The shift of mood here on Endurance was slight, but visible to his trained senses, and aboard the War Master's ship it was more obvious still. Bleak emotions gathered at the edges of his thoughts like distant storm clouds. He could not shake the sensation that something malign was waiting out there, gathering strength and biding its time. And so Garrow did what he had made into a quiet, personal habit, in order to clear his mind and find focus for the coming battle. High up atop the Endurance's dorsal hull lay the oval dome of the ship's observatorium, a space put aside so that naval crew might be able to take emergency star-fix sightings should the vessel's cogitators become inoperative. It also served a purely ornamental function, although there were few among the Death Guard who ever used it for so trivial a purpose. Garrow dimmed all the glow globes in the chamber and seated himself at the control console. The operator chair shifted back and reclined on quiet hydraulics. Presently, the battle captain was tilted so he could take in the unfettered sweep of the starscape. Istvan's blue-white sun was a bright glow off in the lower quadrant, attenuated by a localized polarization in the augmented armor glass. He looked away from it and let the blackness surround him. Gradually, tension eased from the knots in his muscles. Garrow felt adrift in the ocean of stars, cupped in the bubble of atmosphere. He saw past the silver flashes of ship hulls, out into the deep void, and not for the first time, he looked and wondered where home was. Officially, the home world of the 14th Legion was Barbarous, a cloud-wreathed sphere near the edge of the Gothic sector. It was from that troubled world that most of the Death Guard's number originated, men like Grulgor and Typhon,
Decius and Sendek, even Caleb. Garrow had learned to have deference and respect for the planet and its testing nature, but it would never be home to him. Garrow had been born on Terra, and drawn up into the Legiones Astartes before men had even known the name of Barbarus. In those years, the 14th Legion had gone by a different title, and they had no Primarch but the Emperor himself. Garrow swelled with pride to remember that time. They had been the Dusk Raiders, so known because of their signature tactic of attacking a foe at nightfall. Then, they had worn armor without the green trim of the current Legion. The war gear of the Dusk Raiders was the dull white of old marble, but with their right arm and shoulders coloured in a deep, glistening crimson. The symbology of the armor showed their foes what they truly were: the Emperor's red right hand, the relentless and unstoppable. Many enemies had thrown down their weapons the moment the sun dipped beneath the horizon, rather than dare to fight them. But that too had changed. When the Emperor's clone sons, the great Primarchs, had been sundered from his side and scattered across the galaxy, the Dusk Raiders joined their brother legions and their master in the Great Crusade that began the age of the Imperium. Garrow had been there, centuries past. It did not seem so long ago, and yet there were countless years of time measured by Terran clocks that he had lost in the confusion of the warp, in cryogenic stasis and through the strange physics of near light-speed travel. Garrow had been there as the Emperor crossed the galaxy in search of his star-lost children: Sanguinius, Ferrus, Guilliman, Magnus, and the rest. With each reuniting, the Lord of Mankind had gifted his sons with command of the forces that had been created in their image. When at last the Emperor came to Barbarus and discovered the gaunt warrior foundling leading its oppressed people, he had located the avatar of the 14th Legion. On Barbarus, where Mortarion had come to rest after falling through the chaotic turmoil of a warp storm, the boy Primarch found a planet where the human colonists were ground beneath the heel of a clan of mutant warlords. He grew up to fight them and liberate the commoners, creating his own army of steadfast warriors to lead the way into the poisonous heights where the warlords hid. These men Mortarion named the Death Guard. So it was written that when at last the Emperor and Mortarion met and defeated the Dark Master of the warlords, Barbarus was free, and the Primarch accepted a place in his father's crusade at the head of the 14th Legion. Mortarion's first words to his army were carved in a granite arch over the airlock gate of the battle barge Reaper's Scythe in memory of the moment. He had come at the Emperor's bidding, with the elite of his Barbaran cohort at his side, and hundreds more on the way. Garrow had been there, as nothing more than a line Astartes, when he heard his new Primarch speak. "You are my unbroken blades," he told them. "You are the Death Guard." And with those words, the Dusk Raiders were no more. Things changed. On the day of Mortarion's coronation as Primarch, a good majority of the 14th Legion had been of Garrow's stock, men born on Terra or within the confines of the Sol system. But slowly that number had dwindled, and as new recruits joined the Death Guard fold, they came only from Barbarus. Now, as the 31st millennium turned about its axis, there was only a comparative handful of Terrans in the Legion. In his blackest moments, Nathaniel imagined a time when there would be none of his kinsmen left among the 14th, and with their deaths, the traditions of the old Dusk Raiders would finally fade away. He feared that moment, for when it came to pass, something of the Legion's noble character would die as well. Memory was a curious companion. In some instances, Garrow's fragmentary reminiscences of his deep past were clearer than those of battles some months old, by a peculiarity of the Astartes' implants in his cerebrum. He recalled a moment as a boy growing up in Albia, in front of a memorial to warriors that dated back beyond the 10th millennium, a great arch of white stone and figures made of black metal, the surfaces worn smooth but protected by a layer of synthetic diamond. And he remembered a night on Barbarous, atop one of the highest crags, peering into the sky. The clouds parted for the rarest of moments, and Nathaniel's eyes had found, as they did now beneath the glass dome, a lone dot of light in the great darkness. Now, as then, he looked to the distant star and wondered again if it were home. Could the Emperor, in his matchless capacity, be turning some small scrap of his towering mind towards him? Or was it vanity on Garrow's part to think that he would even merit the notice of the Lord of Mankind? With the next heartbeat, the captain's breath caught in his throat as the light he watched glittered brightly and then faded to nothing, dying before him. The blinded star vanished, leaving a dark pall over Nathaniel's spirit. Decius turned his hand over and held up his palm to the air, catching some of the fat, lazy flakes of snow drifting down around him. In the low gravity of Istvan Extremis, the powdered shavings of nitrogen ice floated in slow motion towards the monochrome grey of the mottled surface. He smiled at the moment in self-amusement and turned the open palm into a ball. It was the match of his right hand, but nowhere near as large as the monstrous power fist lined with green enamel and patient little ticks of lightning. He flexed the heavy fingers experimentally. Decius's control over the glove was so deft that he could pick a flower or crush a skull with equal ease. Not that there was flora of any kind on this dead ball of ice and stone, but there were plenty of heads to break. That was certain. The thought made Decius's smile widen into a cocky grin. He glanced back over his shoulder, across the rippling, crater-pocked plain of the western approaches. Deathguard waited in every shadowed lee, behind every rock and outcropping, silent and ready. The dull colour of their armour was nearly a match for the grey landscape, and it was only the lines of jade trim around their shoulders and breastplates that broke up the camouflage. They were quiet, like their namesake, and prepared for the moment. Decius saw a glint of gold. Captain Garrow was speaking into the helmet of Sergeant Haker. In turn, old Haker moved and passed the order on to Rahl, then to another man, on and on, the commands spreading in a whispering ripple. The 7th Company had observed Vox discipline since the Thunderhawks had set them down over the horizon of the planetoid, out of sight of the monitor station's sensor towers. They communicated by hushed words or by battle sign, advancing with stealth towards the shield wall protecting the west face of the enemy dome complex. This had been done to ensure that all the attention of the Istvanians would be turned elsewhere, out to where the brightly armoured and very visible Emperor's children advanced. Now they were close, and all the waiting, hours so it seemed to Decius, was done. The attack was at hand. Sendek leaned close and spoke into Decius's audio pickup. "Be ready for the word." He nodded in acknowledgement and passed the command on to the Astartes at his side, a warrior with the cobra head shape of a missile launcher on his shoulder. The thin atmosphere of Istvan Extremis did not carry sound well, but such was the cacophony coming from the far side of the rebel complex that it still reached them. Decius could pick out the strained rattle of combi bolters, the smack thud of crack grenade detonations. The noise made his palms itch with anticipation. Then, over the General Vox channel, he heard Garrow break radio silence. "7th! In position!" The battle captain's voice was grim and heavy. Decius's commander had not been himself since he returned from the vengeful spirit, and once more Solon found himself thinking about what might have gone on aboard the War Master's barge. And then this business with Voyan. He shuttered the thoughts away. Decius watched the battlements of the west wall through the magnifiers of his optics, studying the motion of the black figures patrolling up there. They were milling around, unsure of where they were meant to be,